going. Couple things. I work up here at the ski area. I've been here since I graduated from the U in '78, and so I've got a lot of stories. But the ski area snowbird was built '71, the year I graduated from high school, and that they're having their 50th year next year. And I'd like to get my book done by then, because I've got a targeted audience for that, and I want to kind of tie into there's hundreds of thousands of people that come there every year to ski, and it's got a name for itself. So I want to tie into that, get my book done before 2021. So I've got a little bit of time, but the editing for me is going to be huge. And I met some editors last night. I told you we had a small group, and it actually turned out to be about 8 of us there, 8 or 9, with the professor from the U. And he's an amazing guy, teaches on a college level. And I went, oh, this is amazing. We're getting a free class from him if he's going to do this small group down at our church. This is good.
Yeah.
He's a Nigerian, and he's a writer, professional writer, editor, and there's some other people that came that were also really smart as far as, they've got a couple degrees, and one of them, this one girl from the Philippines, has got a degree in English, and she'd be a good editor, copy editor.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to glean as much education as I can, because I was never a writer. I'm just kind of starting out this. I did write for work. Most of that was for our company lawyer. I did all the investigations for accidents, and so everything was matter of fact. This is how it happened. It had to be very precise. And so I've been doing that for about 20 years, and he's been a good coach as the lawyer, but it's kind of dry when you do that kind of writing. So I need a little more pizzazz.
Okay, yeah. That I think, it sounds like a scene by scene kind of outline would help you a lot, because then you can really, before you take the time to write the scenes, you can know how they fit with each other and really kind of pick your story arc,
That's good info. That's really, really helpful, Andy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's what you call a writer downer.
Excellent. So Patty, how are you doing?
Good. Yeah. I went back yesterday and kind of filled in some, in the beginning part, I saw that there was some gaps, some missing parts where, because just going through all of this, realizing I know what I mean, I know what I'm talking about, but there seems to be some gaps, because a lot of times I think we already, we kind of expect people to know what's in our head. And they're like, oh, wait, that doesn't make sense, so I kind of went in there filling in some gaps.
Right.
Yeah. So the pieces, it's like a puzzle piece. There's pieces missing.
Okay.
Yeah. So I felt in the beginning I had some gaps there to help build up to what I'm going to lay into. Yeah. So that was interesting. It's hard, kind of going back and, Yeah, and then I had, because a lot of the writings I do come straight from my journal in recovery, and I had the dates first, and then I thought, I don't know if I want the dates in there. So I took them out, and I'm like, oh my God, why did I do that? So now I feel like I should have some dates in there, because they can just see the development. Mm-hmm. I think it's key point. So now I'm going, oh, crumb cakes. I don't know. Krista and I kind of had a little talk about that, so it's, I don't know.
Yeah. And then on a different note, you're posting about your do you have like a probiotic business or something, or a?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought I saw something online.
Yeah, I'm in health and wellness. I like to help people get healthy, feel their best. Too many times we're too exhausted and we're gravitating toward things that aren't good for us.
Yeah.
You know, especially as writers, I think we hit the slump and then we need to sugar up and caffeine out, and then we crash worse. So, yeah.
Awesome. Who is writing your copy for those when you post those?
I do some of them, and then some people we kind of collaborate. Yeah.
They're really good.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it's really good marketing writing. That's awesome.
Well, mostly my passion is just help people feel their best. Yeah. 'Cause,
Cool.
yeah, too many people are sick and they don't need to be. Yeah. So.
Sweet. Well, if you take that same passion to the way you're writing your book, it's going to come out really awesome.
I'm a pretty passionate person, so yeah. I mean, this is basically what I've been speaking and preaching, you know, various places of the world and locally. So now, but with the book, things I have never spoken about publicly. I didn't feel like God wanted me to, because I'm very cautious of my audience. Now it's like He's really telling me to get real and honest. And Lana Vassar, right when I began to start writing my book, Lana Vassar gave a prophetic word. Are you familiar with her?
Yeah.
Amazing prophetic. So I wrote it up. I have it up on my computer. It's called Mothering a Movement. And basically she said, Mark, this could go for you too. With the seed of my yes, many will come into the kingdom. I won't apologize, water down, or change what God has called me to do. I won't change the subject. And for me, that was so, and this is right when I began to write the book. And so I think too many times we water it down. We want to soften the message, or, but not that we get all religious on people, because that's going to turn, right? But when you talk about, this is my story, this is real, this was my journey, Mark, even with your story, this is my story, this is what I experienced, this is what it was like, and this is where I am today, and this is why. I think that is the power of the story that's going to change lives. Whether it's even writing a fantasy book or something, not, a fiction book, it's the power of the story that makes people go, okay, I didn't think about that, or whatever, That's a different perspective. Andy, I think you touched on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for both of you, the biggest challenge is going to be dramatizing the scenes, because it's the blessing and the challenge that comes with being a kingdom personality, is that we process with the Lord and we heal from things. and then we really want to give people solutions and processes and stuff. And the novel has to take them through the journey of experiencing all the ups and downs, so that then they're open and they go, oh, I need an answer. And you're like, this is the answer I discovered. And they're like, I am ready to hear that now,
Yeah. I know I've been kind of wrestling with that too, because I am a teacher and a speaker, preacher. So, I find I want to elaborate on something, even on the issue of lies, what is that? Or the tears of Jesus, understanding what that is, which is powerful. So I do find myself adding some things in, because it's been impactful for me. But do I not do that in the midst of it? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am a helper. I'm an Enneagram too, man. So I'm a hardcore helper. I'm a yellow personality, whatever you want to say. I want to help people.
Is there a way to lead them to that conclusion and let them take the leap themselves?
So how would I do, okay, so lead them, how, I guess that's the big question, how would you do that?
Well, scene by scene, you'll have to make the decisions on how do I show, because it's going to be a showing, not telling thing. How do I show what happened and show my thought life and prompt them to ask questions in their own life, their own parallels, so that they'll leap to those conclusions.
So maybe, as you're saying this, maybe then the follow-up book would be one that takes all those teaching type things as a follow-up book or a training manual or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
where, okay, now let's break it down, let's go deeper for those who want to do that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Could you even come up with a companion journal or something that asks,
Yeah.
Ask the questions and lets them reflect as they're going through the book, the little section of reflection.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I haven't thought of it that way. I've seen some where at the end of the chapter they'll have reflective questions. Where sorry, well they'll have reflective questions.
Mm-hmm.
Look up the scripture, or what does this say to you, or whatever. Can you remember a moment in your life when this something similar? So I mean, it could go either way.
Yeah. You could include it. I'm starting to love the idea of doing it as a separate journal, like a journal that's focused on the experience of your book, so that then you can use it as an order bump, for people to read.
Yeah, you're 100Xer.
Yep. I'm starting to get the lingo, and we're taking 2 years.
I started just with the 414 is when I jumped in. I had no idea who this crazy Pedro guy was.
I saw his original ads and just through my own woundedness didn't jump in on them and kept thinking, oh, I missed out. It'll never happen again. And then I took it in July when his basic master class was still 2 weeks. He dropped it from 30 days to 2 weeks. And then he began getting down into where his master class was 1 week. He ran that 7 or 8 times, and he started going through different, 818 and different content. I did so many different challenges with him before I finally had cobbled together the money to be able to do it, and had my wife's permission, and she was excited about it too. So we finally jumped in November of 2018, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, 414 was like a fire hose. You're just like, whoa. It was awesome. It was a good time. How about you? When did you jump in, Mark?
You're not muted. Oh, no. Now we can't hear you. Now you're muted.
Unmute. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I jumped in, it was Memorial Day a year ago. I was down in San Diego at a conference with Lance Wallnau.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know who Pedro was. And Lance says, hey, there's this crazy new guy, and he's really rocking the internet right now. You need to listen to him. And I listened to him, and I just went, I'm in.
Wow.
So I joined, and then I went out to his conference in Vacaville that fall, and got blown away. Came back and started. My pastor asked me to start a men's group at church, and I was like, no way, men don't get together unless you have food. And I said, I'll tell you what, Pastor, if you let me do it as a live Facebook group, I'll do it.
Wow.
Okay, so that's how it started, and we started on Martin Luther King Day, January 15th, 2020. We kind of had this 2020 vision thing going, and got it up and running, and next thing you know, this COVID hit, and we were already in place. So we've been going every Monday night since January, and that's been good training for me to be live. And and then I got updated my Zoom so I can go over that 40 minutes, and it's been good. So yeah, it's almost like you said, drinking from a fire hose. There's almost too much, and my problem is I need to pull back.
Yeah.
I got too many irons in the fire right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah, I was like, with his category king thing, has been amazing. But, I was like, oh man, that more training from that. That sounds really awesome. And I thought, nope, girl, you got this book. And if you jump into that, I can go 50 places. Like, oh my God, that's amazing. So I was like, no, pull back. So I am gonna jump into this because I think this is really where God's calling me to do this.
Right.
I need the help. I want to do it right. I don't want to, when you get up in New Year's, you're like, okay, quit screwing around and do it right. Right, Mark?
Right. I see Richard's on, but I can't see him.
He's being shy.
Hiding behind the gate.
I'm eating. You want my food too?
Oh,
Yeah. What do you got?
It's a hamburger, potato chips, baked beans, and fresh fried apples. So
Comfort
You
food.
were having Labor Day ahead of time, man. That's awesome.
yeah. So 12 o'clock is a rough time for me to be in a meeting.
oh,
Yeah, because I have to go get lunch from my parents, in their 90s at 12 or 11:30, and then get it to them, and then get back and then eat lunch. So
Wow.
anyway, so I don't want to show off my food. Sorry.
how's the water damage? How's the water damage going?
We're getting it under control. I still need to fight some possible mold that in the crawl space that I'm not exactly sure how to handle, but we're gonna have to. I don't want to deal with it, but anyway, but it's coming. We're gaining. We're gaining. So,
Great.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead and eat. We'll watch.
No pressure.
Mm.
All right,
yeah.
buddy.
Was I supposed to answer something else?
Oh, Mark got muted again.
Take your camera off and eat in private. You're making me hungry.
Thank you.
I'll jump into training and we'll knock that out. And then if we have any questions or answers or anything like that we need to get to, then we can do it afterwards. Let's see. All right. Everybody see the slides? Sweet. Okay, well, welcome to, that's really weird. It didn't, it's not letting me advance or go back. Let's try that again. We'll try it one more time. I have the hardest time with screen sharing out of everything that I do. Okay, so welcome to essentially our final formal teaching session, which is actually a makeup session. I knew I'd have problems somewhere and have to do a makeup session. I was originally going to do, Friday hot seats, maybe Saturday Q&As and stuff like that, but I think it's gone pretty well. I think we're doing pretty good at getting people their money's worth. But it's week 3, the end of week 3. We still have a day left to write because it's a 21-day challenge. So Hopefully everybody's still cruising along in momentum. Session 8 with Andy Bunch and Krista Dunk. Today I want to cover good writing part 2. So week 2 ended up being about bad writing, and week 3 ended up being about good writing. Just a little bit different way of focusing on the same issues. I try to sort the ones that were hard to spot into the stuff on bad writing so you can see those. And then these are, the third week really is about finesse and about making it a really great novel that stands out, or a really great book that stands out. So covering topics like tone, focus, setting, pacing and progression, and subtlety. We'll get to all of that. Now that's junk slide. Differentiating tone from sound and style. I already covered sound. I don't think I covered style, but we'll kind of do it here. The basic definitions, the quick, easy definitions are that sound is technical. It's sentence structure, it's flow, it's rhythm, but it is in the words and in the punctuation. You can go through with an editor and fix it without having to do a lot of rewrite. Style is a blend of the two. It's half technical, half intention behind it. So is your style florid? Is your style Spartan? Is it vaporous? You know, what is it, effervescent? You know, what sort of style do you want to bring to the flow of your language? And the only way you can mess up style is if it's horribly it's incongruous with the subject matter. Don't have sort of a humorous style with really serious subject matter, or even unless you can get away with it. There's so many rules that you can break if you are the 1 in a million writers who actually can do it. Tone is all about intention: witty, sarcastic, serious, intimate. They sound like very similar descriptive words to style, but tone and intention has to be written in. It has to be baked in. It has to be something that you really really intended to have happen. And if you don't like your tone, you're going to probably end up rewriting a lot of sentences. So tone might be one of those things. And I recommend this for all 3 of these. Probably the best practice is when you've written 3 or 4 chapters. I mean, if you're drafting and you're hot and heavy and you're going, you might want to just draft the rest of the way through. I would suggest, though, if you've got a chunk of it down and you're kind of stuck and you're not really sure where to go anyways, rewrite that first 3 or 4 chapters and play with it. Play with the combination of sound, tone, and style, and make sure that you're happy with how those are flowing, because it'll be a lot of rewriting if you do the whole novel and you end up deciding you don't like your tone. And I like this. I love the combo of the 3 create the melody of the work. There's many people make a comment that poets end up making great prose writers, and it's true. A lot of people go from poetry to prose. It can be a little heavy-handed, a little bit. When a poet goes into prose, they will often develop problems like we talked about earlier, where the writing becomes about their expression of something and not so much about having the reader have a great experience of the writing. But what they do on the bright side is they sort of naturally come to that intentionality, the stuff like tone, where it really aids the rhythm of the reading of the book. This will make more sense. We'll pound on through this. I think people will catch on to what I'm saying. So tone is the reason why sometimes style and sound are technically wrong, but it works anyways. And I gave you then a line from a poem, which is not prose, but the Jabberwocky, if you're familiar with it, the "'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe," you know, is a bunch of nonsense, but we all kind of know what he's trying to say, even though he made up half the words. He followed 2 things. He followed the English grammatical system. So he's got enough nouns are nouns, verbs are verbs, adverbs are adverbs. He obeyed the rules enough so that we understand what he's trying to say. But he did a masterful job with the tone of it. So that as we're reading, as you read that whole entire thing, you kind of continue to stay in where he's going with it. It's called Jabberwocky, and the manner in which he wrote it all supports this feeling of nothingness. Now, no, you're not ever going to have to go that far because you're not writing a short poem. You're writing a whole book. So you have a whole 30,000 words or whatever to develop your tone. The tone is a choice that sometimes we make unconsciously. In fact, I would argue that 99% of the time we'll make it unconsciously. And I would argue that probably 90% of the books that have a super successful tone and sell really well, the author did it almost on instinct. So just beware as you get feedback from your first readers. It can be hard for them to put their finger on what's wrong with tone, but it could be off-putting or heavy-handed if you've overdone it. So yeah, asking for your first readers for feedback on tone. And like I said, it inhabits the entire text, so it can be hard to do well. So it can be, tone it down. If you're tempted, if you see yourself overdoing tone, and really go off of your hero, go off of your main focal point character, or go opposite to your hero. If your hero is really radical and it's important for us to have an external experience of the hero, then your tone might be different. Gosh. Here's a good example of tone matching the hero. If you read Dashiell Hammett, if you read any of those gritty crime novels where you've got a grizzled old veteran detective who's seen it all, and that's his character, but it's also written in a way that lends everything to it. An example of where I think somebody went overboard would be Elmore Leonard. If you've ever read Get Shorty or any of those books, Elmore Leonard tends to have his narrator sound a lot like his characters. They all have a New Jersey accent, and it drives me nuts. I would like my narrator to have a different voice than that. Makes the character stand out to me. But yeah, you can, like I said, you can take 5 pages and rewrite them in different tones: happy, sad, nostalgic, angry, witty, sarcastic, trivial, mocking, dry. Just play with tone if you feel like tone's a problem. If you feel like you're instinctively using a good tone, like Patty, who has been speaking on her topic for ages, probably already has tone baked into everything she's doing with it. It's been there for years, and it would be really difficult to try and change it at this point. So don't slow yourself down, especially while you're drafting, to try and work on tone. Just be aware that it's one of the things that you could get feedback from a reader on. Focus. Your book is about something it needs to come full circle. You need to close every loop, or you've abused the reader. I put that there because that's strong language, and I really mean it. Don't write something where the wording is done extremely well. The characters are fascinating. The plot is amazing. Everything is going really well. And then they get to the end of the book and the book kind of ends. And maybe you resolved even the main thing, but you left characters out there. You left subplots out there. You left everything that hasn't come full circle. And your reader will never be able to put their finger on what's wrong with it, but they will have a love-hate relationship with your book. So in your scene outline, in your plot point outline, make sure that you are hitting, you're closing all the loops. Remember, as you're writing, and from Mark's point, as you're writing, make sure that you're taking that into account as you're planning, so that you know every time I open a loop. Remember, we talked about story clock. Every time I kind of start something in the 1 through 6 side of the clock, in the 6 through 12 side of the clock, I need to be bringing it closing those loops. It requires you to step back from your beautiful words and take a critical eye at what's going on in the storyline beneath all of it. So you're going to have to be revising your book at the 50,000 foot level, and revising your book at the 1 foot level. And that may take separate editing passes. So you'll develop a rhythm. As you do book after book, you'll say, oh, I can turn right back around and look at that 50,000 foot level of what's going on in my story. And then I hand it off to a first reader. And when they give me their feedback, I start addressing their feedback, and I go really tight in and start looking at the words and the rhythm and all that stuff. So the key is loving your who. You're giving them something, and so you want to deliver on it. If you promise it in the beginning, deliver in the end. And we talked about hooks, and we talked about keeping your hook and maintaining your hook. And that's really what it comes down to. Make a big promise at the beginning that's exciting and keeps them going, but make sure you deliver on it. You have to resolve what happens to every character. You have to have all the subplots. Did you conclude every event? And make sure that all your events and characters, we called it focus because all your events and characters have to advance the plot. Don't have people in there who aren't doing something that pulls us forward, by and large. Your reader will tolerate it to a degree, but not to a large extent. And I have gotten busted on this. I get feedback on this actually, because I have a cast of hundreds in my first fantasy novel. I did so deliberately because I have an impenetrable swamp, and every time they cross the impenetrable swamp, 2 or 3 characters die. It sounds horrifying and depressing, but that's where I was at when I was writing that particular book. And I have it's a 3-book series. They're very large. So we're talking about across the scope of 150,000 words. We're going to resolve a lot of people's stuff. So I have a lot of characters, and people get really attached to them, and then they're really unhappy when they die, but they die gloriously, so it's okay. It's a fantasy book. Think Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of named characters in there. Beware of places you give yourself license to pontificate. You want to have beautiful words, but you don't want to have soliloquies. You don't want to have long places where people get lost in you writing poetry in the middle of your prose. Make sure your book is actually sticking to the track, the plot line you picked out for it. And again, this is more stuff for you to read. Don't worry about this in plot and drafting. Worry about it in revising. And here's why: because tangents aren't all bad. Sometimes you go off on a tangent and it winds up developing into a subplot that really enriches your book. So it's okay to follow the wild goose for a while. It's also okay to decide later on you're going to have to drop it out. That's all okay. Just make sure the final product has focus. Setting is not everything, but there are plot-driven people, and there are people who believe character and setting are enough to make a plot out of almost anything. And I like balance. I like having a tightly written plot in advance, but I want to make sure that my characters and my settings are strong. It can be a character, as I mentioned, and I mean, think about like I said, the gritty detective novel. And there's really 2 big categories, maybe a lot of subgenres, but there's 2 big categories of mystery. One is the gritty detective novel with the hardened guy who's seen everything, and it's hard-hitting and it's fast-paced. And the other is the cozy mystery. And the cozy mystery always has a setting out in a rural place. I mean, you might put it on board a ship or something like that, but typically it's out in the beautiful, unspoiled countryside. And we do that because then the murder seems more horrible. Somebody has died, and it's a place where it's paradise. And so it really despoils paradise. And that makes our sleuth hero more good. He is really heroic because he is restoring order and balance. He is making sure to protect the innocence of the entire setting, in addition to catching the bad guys. So setting, in those scenarios, setting really plays a role in everything to do with the book. But a balanced description, action, dialogue, and setting. So your setting and description, basically, you want to balance them with action and dialogue to keep your book moving along. And I haven't specifically pondered what that looks like in more of a memoir. I would know it when I saw it, but I was trying to think about this for this slide. I thought, not everybody's writing fiction. I still think you need a balance, but how that balance looks for you is probably going to be pretty unique to you, because memoirs are a little bit more tailored to you, and people who would like your story are probably going to tolerate how you tell it best. But you can't avoid common mistakes. This is stuff that really doesn't fly anywhere. Having no setting at all, or setting that stops the flow, that was tolerated a lot more in the classics. If you think about the books you read in high school,
I want to go back there.
and think about how many times they
Right.
opened a chapter with paragraph after paragraph um, of description, and then got back into the plot of what was happening. It was a style back in the day, and it's not so much anymore. But your settings have to change. Don't have them all be the same, and obviously that's hard to do if you're in a, you know, if you've locked on a ship, or if the entire novel takes place in a cabin in the mountains and you're snowed in or something. But you've got to find a way to try and vary it up a little bit. Make sure your setting comes to life. Make sure there's enough in there. Same as you're adding little bits of detail here and there for your characters so we can tell them apart. Make sure that it's distinct. Most people, you could just, it's enough almost to say you walked into the kitchen. We know what a kitchen looks like. But if they walk into the living room, what does a living room look like? It's pretty different depending on where you're at. So you may need enough setting to make sure that we understand what environment the scene is happening in. Make, you know, and then it's best to have the setting have some impact on the characters, and to not have a character that not have a setting that doesn't interact with the characters. If they're in the living room and that scene could have taken place in the garden, why did you put it in the living room? Is it that, you know, if it's a comfortable scene, it may not matter that they're in the living room. But if the subject matter they're talking about is uncomfortable inherently, is it better to have it take place on the porch, have them sit on a hard wooden bench, or have them sit on a stool? It's a four-legged stool, but only 3 of them are level to the ground, so that there's something going on in the setting that communicates to us in a subtle way that everything about this scene makes us unsettling, you know? So that's ways you can use setting, just a couple ideas. 5 ways you can quickly bring setting to life. Add a tiny detail like cobwebs or a ripped couch. Like I mentioned, you do the same thing with characters. You're doing with settings, so you're adding little details. Use all 5 senses, especially lighting and smell. This is what writers commonly eliminate. And a dimly lit room versus a brightly lit room versus hospital too bright room, kind of those communicate a lot. And smells we don't think of in books, but they really matter, because we all associate memories with smell. So if you can tag a smell into a memory, and your reader already has a memory of that smell, particularly some smells you can't control. Like if like the smell of roses might mean different things to different people, but the smell of mold, probably everybody has a very similar emotional response to. So being aware of that. Climate, you know, extreme temperatures, rain, tornadoes, you know, what can you do with that scene? Like I said, if it's a sad scene, it's not wrong to have some rain somewhere, or a waterfall or something, water droplets, something that communicates that. Interactions, you know, an annoying sound, chores, doorbells, and that's really, you know, a phone rings, something that where the scene creates an interruption. It can just extend your scene, so have a reason for it. But if somebody's having trouble saying something, having them really actually physically get interrupted. You know, if somebody's distracted in what they're saying, having them do the dishes while they're having their dialogue is a great, you know, what's distracting them. Have action from your scene or your setting into your characters and your plot. And then create an optimum feeling for the reader by moving them toward what the hero should be feeling. Our reader should hopefully always be feeling what our viewpoint character is feeling. And that's where setting really comes in to help. If they're imagining in their mind, if there's a picture screen in their mind and they're playing this like a movie in their head, and that's what you want, because then you're in your book and not just skimming it, then they should be feeling and thinking similar things to what your hero does. Otherwise, at some point, they can get a little bit of whiplash when your hero does something that's radically different from them. Now, that whiplash might be what you're going for. There might be a place where what's interesting about it is that your hero zigs when they would all zag, because then they feel good. Believe it or not, your character likes to feel a little bit superior to your reader likes to feel a little bit superior to your main character. They like to go, well, I wouldn't have done that, you know, but they'll read on because this guy now has just the right amount of foibles. Or pacing and progression. It's highly subjective and it involves your entire work. So And sadly, it's really hard to rewrite the first chapters and have better pacing for your entire book. You're going to have to write your entire book and then look at the pacing of your entire book. So it's like soup. All the ingredients can be in there, but it's still too thick or too thin. It's not good, you know. So you have to look at the whole thing and make sure that your pacing matches the plot exposition, they call it. As we as readers discover what's going on in the novel, it's all coming at us rapidly, but not too rapidly. Appropriate to the type of book that we're writing. So mysteries tend to have a little bit more of a hockey stick, where there's just a lot of discovery, and then all of a sudden a big reveal. Most action thrillers have like a constant rising sort of a rising action, sort of a plot line. And then, so how you write, there's ways to control the pacing with the words. So there's ways to reveal things in time. So we're typically too close to spot this on our own. It really takes a first reader, takes feedback from someone for pacing and progression. And the other thing is your first reader is going to have to be people who can hold 200 or 300 pages in their mind. And I love, there's a description. I wish I'd highlighted it. There in Noah Lukeman's the first 5 pages, there's this great description of what an editor does. An editor is able to hold your entire book in their head all at once. They can check for continuity on something they read yesterday. They can check for does the pacing and the tone in chapter 5 match the pacing and the tone midway through chapter 1. They're keeping all of that up in their head. They're climbing into your book and looking for cracks, and it's pretty amazing that anybody can do it, and they're worth their weight in gold. I'm highly biased because I edit a lot, but but pacing and progression, you're going to need somebody who has the talent and skill to at least be able to hold 2/3 of the book in their head at a time and read fast enough to be able to check for that. If the first reader says the pace is too slow, you might have you might be more into your world building than your reader is. You might have too much world. You find a more or less original situation. So if you're having to describe things continuously, you've probably picked setting that our readers are all unfamiliar with. This can happen a lot in fantasy, where you have a lot of things you need to establish because you built a very unique world, and then you're constantly having to stop and clue people into what these devices are, or what it's really like in space and time, how it works on this planet and all that stuff. So you may have to adjust, and you may have to compromise with the situation and your setting to pick the pace up a little bit. You can also increase narrative tension. This is a weird example for people in this group, but it's the example that I heard from some of my instructors early on. You have a conversation, or it's a pretty common argument between a husband and a wife, and it doesn't last very long, but there's some plot revealed in the conversation, in the argument. And you'd think the argument is tense enough because it's a little bit of an argument, but you don't ultimately want those characters to go through a crisis of their relationship. They just have a disagreement. And then you put a pistol on the coffee table between them. And the narrative tension rises because we're not exactly sure how high the stakes are. And our relief when they winds up to be a minor tiff is escalated. Now, most of you are writing a memoir, so if there wasn't a pistol on the table, it would seem really awkward to throw one in. But that's kind of just an example of narrative tension. Doing something to raise the stakes. You can do that just as easily with a manila envelope full of documents, and we're not really sure what those documents are. But don't throw something like that in if you don't have any ability to describe why they later on would be there, what's really in them. But if they're going to be there later on, if somebody at some point is going to whip out some documents from a manila envelope, you can put them in an earlier scene and let the reader ponder what's going on with that. What's that about? So cut down. Cutting down the distance between major plot points, just sort of writing it a little bit tighter so that'll pick your pace up. Cutting down the telling and description. So if you have too much telling or too much showing, either one will slow it down. So trying to balance that a little bit. If the first reader says it's too fast, Your plot exposition is not the same as storytelling. Yes, you can tell a lot of stories. A lot of people will have an entire chapter that tells an entire story, like it's unto itself a short story. And that can be great as long as you're moving the plot forward, the whole story arc, as long as we understand that something has moved to the next beat in our, you know, Pulp Fiction, if you ever saw it. Pulp Fiction had each chapter be entirely unto itself. And you didn't really learn whose story it was or what was going on until the very end. It's just luckily it was a very evocative story and you could follow each scene was interesting enough. But then you got to the very end and you found out, oh, that's the good guy. And that's how he wins. That's what he was trying to do. Are you avoiding less comfortable skills like character description and setting? If it's too fast, you might be writing fast because you're just not engaging with the stuff that's harder for you to do. And you might have way too much dialogue. So again, progression is about getting somewhere. So pacing is about kind of how fast does the reader feel like the story is going. Progression is how fast are they really moving from plot beat to plot beat, and so that it's all entirely getting done. So you can be going nowhere fast, and that's mainly a problem for pantsers. They write in such a wonderful, evocative way because they're entertained by their own story, and it's going somewhere, and they're following the rabbit trail, and it's fascinating, and then they write themselves into a corner. But it's still really great writing, and people would read it. So it's really hard to kill all of that when it turns out it doesn't move you towards your ultimate destination. Oh, typos, Andy. Make her your readers. You can make them work a little bit more. What I mean by that is, having them guess at what's going on a little bit, having them, forcing them to engage with the picture in their mind to tell them what might be going on. You get that a lot with mysteries, but you can get a lot with regular writing too, with non-mysteries. Yeah, and pump up the tension and the ambiguity. As I say, ambiguity when the reader has a sense like it could go this way or it could go that way. It could go anywhere. Where is this really going? There's a great quote by Emerson: treat people as if they are real, because sometimes they are. It's a very poetic way of saying just respect your readers. Or as in Pedro Adeo speak, love your readers, and treat them the way you'd like to be treated. Okay, so we rushed through a lot there. Let's do some Q&A.
All right. What's a pantser?
Mm.
Pantser. Because I see that word and I go, I think about that stupid joke we used to do. You went up and pants somebody.
I was wondering the same thing.
Well, so what is a pantser?
That is a great question. And we get you got Krista's funny bone. We get that term from a writer named Chris Beatty, who wrote a book called No Plot, No Problem. And he was the force behind the National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, they call it, National Novel. In every November, there's roughly 1 million authors who all try and write a book in 1 month. They try and race through a book in 30 days, the month of November. And fortunately, it's also No Shave November, so you gain 5 minutes there every day. But he believes there's plotters and there's pantsers. There's people who will write an outline, and there's people who sit down with an idea in their head and it flows better and they engage with it and they enjoy it more, and they need a word count goal. Like, I'm just going to write 1,667 words a day, because for even weekends. So that's what it takes to get through 50,000 words, which is the average smallish novel. Not real small, but a lot of, if you're writing a Western or a mystery or a romance, those all tend to hit right in the 50,000 word level. And so that's a good doable 30-day goal. That the first way, it's right, like running a marathon. It's just, I try to do it every year. It's fun. And I miss about half the time. But Chris Beatty came up with the idea of what he called a pantser. And he said, you can get a book by pantsing just as well as you can get a book by being a plotter. So he has pantsers and plotters. And most of the professional writing world would disagree with him, but and if you see most of the drafts, the first drafts that come out of trying to write 50,000 words in 1 month, they're very rough. They need a lot of revision, but it does get people over the hump. You get people who had a book stuck inside them forever, and now it's out. And what you find is 4 out of 10 people go, that's all I needed to do. Now I'll go back to my day job and I'm happy. And then you get another 3 or 4 people out of that who said, I'm going to go back and I'm going to clean it up and I'm going to make it work, because until I hold it in my hand, it isn't something. And then you get, another 2 or 3 people who are like, I'm going to fall in love with this. I love writing now, and I now have permission to do it my way. And they write 3 or 4 books, and then they start writing outlines and working from a plot because it saves so much time. Anyways, that's a good question. Krista Dunk, what is your... I waited until she got her hands in the sink, I bet you. Literally dishes. You're still muted.
Yes, my husband and we're having some people over later, and we're preparing stuff in the crock pot right at the moment. It's going to take 6 hours.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Sorry about the background sink noise here. So what was your question to me?
What is your, what do you feel about pantsers and plotters? Do you have any sort of...
Goodness, I think it just depends on the way your brain works. You know what I mean? For me, I think I've done probably both methods, and I have decided that I like to start with an outline first, because I've done the brain dump and felt like it was hard to organize later, so that's just me. So whatever works best for you. There's so many different ways that can work. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah. It's the trick. I think the trick is finding the balance, because if you don't give yourself a little bit of flexibility, then you can lose the joy of the writing. So
That's true too.
So it's almost like you have to have an outline, but you have to have just enough outline to keep you on track, and not so much that it robs the experience of writing.
That's true. Because like if you think about speakers, there's 3 different kinds of speakers. One speaker goes, I have a general idea of what I'm going to talk about, and I have no notes. And then there's another speaker that has notes that's very loose outline. It's almost like just a thing that's like, oh, remind me to say that. Oh, I probably want to mention something about that next. And they just something to spark their memory, and then they can talk on that spark memory thing for 5 minutes, and then they go to the next. And then there's the speaker that types out every exact thing that they want to say for the entire speech. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the same for authors too. Like, what works for you? How does your brain work? We're all different. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny though, the pantsers, because my kids and I were having an argument over that, Mark, because I'm like, no, it's de-pants. Because if you're going to pants somebody, that means you're going to put their pants on. Like, you know what I mean? Anyway, we had this whole couple months ago. Anyway, so that's awesome. That did tickle my funny bone.
Well, and on the topic of NaNoWriMo, we were talking about Scrivener, and I mentioned a way to get Scrivener cheaper. Scrivener is perennially a sponsor of NaNoWriMo. So in November, so if you want to try it out, but you're not sure you want to try out Scrivener right now, sign up for NaNoWriMo. It's basically free. They like donations. They're a nonprofit company. And you can find them I think you should be able to find them at nanowrimo.com. But if you search for them, you'll find them. Anyways, you sign up for them, do your best to write 50,000 words. If you don't complete 50,000 words, it's sort of on the honor system. They do have a place you can upload them. You could literally take a novel you've already written or something like that and stick it in there. They don't retain it. So you can put it in there just so that you get 50,000 words written, and, and hit submit, and it goes, oh yeah, you wrote 50,000 words. And then Scrivener will chop their price in half. They'll sell it to you for $20 instead of $40. So it is a way to try out Scrivener for $20 instead of $40 if you don't mind waiting till the end of November to buy it, if that's an interest to you.
But if now with the academy and Krista, you have that outline, would I need Scrivener if I have that outline?
Okay, you're talking about like the book template?
Yeah, the template. Yeah.
Well, I think it's just Scrivener. You probably have worked with it more, Andy, too. You may or may not need it. I wonder myself if Scrivener is a little bit more useful for people that are writing fiction.
Writing what?
Fiction, possibly.
Oh.
But then again, maybe not. Feel like I have a system kind of that works for me, that I haven't used Scrivener. Oh, Mark, it's spelled, I put a link in the group, I think 2 days ago too, by the way.
Yes.
There's the Scrivener spelling. I put it in the, yep,
Okay.
I did it right. And so if you have the book template, it lays out all the different sections of your book kind of in order. And then the instructions that go with it talk about what you could put in each of those sections and, the flow of that. So I think it just depends. You might want to look at the Scrivener and just look through their website.
Yeah.
See all the ideas and talk about that, Andy, and give your opinion on that too.
I'm kind of trying to see if I can bring Scrivener up and do a screen share.
Oh yeah, there you go. And then you can kind of see how it looks.
Yeah. For me, I love it for drafting, and I can't stand it for how they export. There are a few people who like how they export, and it can be a little bit sloggy to get used to depending on how your brain works. But on the left here you have, and they have names for everything. They call this the binder, but essentially because you could have more than one book. So it's like a binder with, and you can have a notes section, you can have ideas, you can have research, and and things that you throw away. And so then you can just expand it and go through. There's book 2, and all the different sections. And then there's a note card view, which is one of the handiest. So over here you have notes. So I can put in metadata on each scene over here on the right and just type in gobbledygook about the scene. I can label it as notes or ideas or research, chapters or subsections. I can put the status it's probably draft, first draft, revised, revision, title page. I can set the status to whatever I want to. And then here when you export it, you actually compile it. So I can put if I want to include it in there, or if it's entirely notes, then I would not include it. Do I need a page break before it? The start of a chapter, that kind of thing. Or compile it as it is. And then I've got general notes. I can do specific notes. So I might have something where I'm like, hey, remember this about this project. Can you help me stay focused on this as a project, no matter where I'm going with this book? There's different views, keywords, custom metadata. I like leaving it at notes, but and then the best thing I want to show you is, so I'll show you the corkboard view. I can basically outline all of my scenes like they're on a 5x7 card, and then move them around. I can actually even kind of drag and drop different scenes into different locations. I generally tend to work off the left because I tend to think more in an outline format. But this can kind of be nice if you want to write different, and then you can just click into this and you can type your notes on here. So you could just create a bunch of 5x7 cards, type notes on each of them, and then when you go into that into that chapter, you can read, or you can just start typing in there. It winds up being nice because you can create an outline over here on the left. You can just sort of create section 1, intro, and then underneath each one of these. So section 1, my intro section, I have my introduction, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. It's just kind of, I mean, you could look up a lot of different Scrivener tutorials that would show you how to do it. But this is kind of the basic idea. Here, you can do all kinds of things. You can put a target. How many words do I want to write per day? My manuscript target and this session's target, you know, and it'll keep track as I'm typing, tell me when I hit my target. Little built-in features like that. But there we go. There's the easy way to switch back and forth between views. There's a lot of little things you can do. It's pretty rudimentary as far, so that's why I say it's hard to set up for print using this tool. But you can just export it to a Word document and clean it up. And it just depends on whether that's easier. But like I said, with nonfiction, if you have an awesome template like Krista Dunk has created for nonfiction, it can be easier just to type it in that. And then if you're typing it in the template, then you're basically typing it in the format it's going to eventually be printed in. So it's saving you a step of doing conversion and stuff like that. If you're doing a novel, if it's 50,000 words and you've got lots of characters, lots of plots and subplots, it can really help. This metadata really comes in handy. I used to keep, and this is just one of my Scrivener binders, but usually I have one down here on characters. And then I'm basically keeping track of, you know, is the character right-handed or left-handed? What's their eye color? What's their hair color? I need to keep all that sorted so that people don't switch, because it's really annoying when somebody becomes left-handed halfway through the book and you didn't mean it to happen, and you don't notice until a reader picks it up and it's already been published and you're like, what? Why did I do that? And this has been going on for centuries, by the way. If you look up Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe at one point takes all of his clothes off and swims out to the wreckage of the ship. And then he stuffs his pockets with biscuits and swims back to shore. It's so continuity errors creep up no matter how masterful a writer you are.
The non-existent pockets, right?
Yes. So that's kind of the gist of Scrivener. Like I said, it's an extra step for some people, but if your brain works that way, you want to be able to work off of, 5x7 cards and a cork board, but then not only is it my outline, but I can just actually click into it and start typing and writing in there. And then as I come up with ideas like, oh, yet to be written in this chapter would be a great thing to have over here in my notes. I use maybe 40% of Scrivener and I still bother to use it a lot of the time because it helps.
It's like an idea depository spot.
Yes.
And then you can also reorganize some of your stuff too at will.
Yeah. With
as
my
well.
nonfiction, what I usually use in there nonfiction wise is things that I think are going to be a series, because I try and come up with a really tight focus of what this book is going to be about. And I get all of these ideas that don't belong there. And so I shove them down
in the subsequent ones. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be in book 2 or book 3 or something like that. But sometimes I've written the whole, a whole chapter in it, and then I go, you know what, this is not about this book. So I don't lose it. I just shove it down for the future book. It's already written. But that, anyways, so that's Scrivener in a nutshell. Other questions?
I think Mark had a question about how to spell that event.
I
in
typed
November.
I typed it in the.
Oh, you did. I see it.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's typically how you see it, with the capitalizations that way and everything. It's just culturally how they do it. They have their own culture. It's fun. They have write-ins. Everyone will go to the same coffee shop on the same day at the same time and all ignore each other and write. And somebody will put a timer out. They'll have a volunteer leader and they'll put a timer out and they'll do a race. Who can do the most words in the shortest amount of time? And when you win, they'll put the stuffed animal at your table for the next hour or whatever. It's crazy fun. But,
I think we're going to do some of that virtual write-ins.
Yeah.
For the Academy stuff too. Yeah. From time to time. And I think we're also going to do author interview practice, because one of the one of the best ways for people to market is to get interviews. But if you're not really confident on how to do that, that can seem really intimidating. But if we have some practice, then anyway, we'll do that from time to time as well.
That's fantastic. And Krista should be the one who has the hookup on that, because she's got a lot of, she's gone even further with people. I really admire the Harrison brothers, and you've invested in them a lot, huh?
Yes, I took their full author speaker coaching thing that was $10,000 plus travel expenses 3 different times. It was quite expensive, but it was, wow. I would do it again.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's part of the reason why I can now teach others and help others, is because of all of that training that I spent a lot of money on. And a lot.
They're the guys behind really the super success of Chicken Soup for the Soul and Rich Dad Poor Dad, and just a lot of really big selling books came out of people being smart enough to spend money with the Harrison brothers. And
Wasn't Chicken Soup for the Soul rejected?
Many, many times.
mhm.
I think over 140 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot.
Yeah, Jack Canfield has got so many fun stories about that, about the publisher that ultimately took him on typically did smaller print runs, had a very more of a niche market, and they they had a conversation at one point about the first print run, which he was, I think, I can't remember, the first print run was going to be 50,000-60,000 books or something, and Canfield said, you've got to print way more than that. You've got to print. I'm thinking 500,000. The guy's like, we've never done a first print run of 500,000. You're crazy. It's your first book. What are you talking about? And he's like, I have 500,000 pre-sold. So
Wow.
the publisher said, okay, well, we'll print 500,000 then and see how it goes. He said, we now laugh about it on my publisher's private jet. I don't have a private jet, but he does.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Yeah, I'm sure those 140 some that rejected him are real sad now, but that's the
Yep.
way it goes. Like you said, they look for ways to say no
Yeah.
because they just have so many people submitting stuff. It's just, which is sad.
Yeah. Another term you'll hear a lot is over the transom, which is a term that you guys probably get. And young people have never probably even encountered that term. You know how a transom is that window above a doorway? And so it refers to the idea that an unknown author or somebody, if it's an unsolicited manuscript, you're literally having to shove it in. They have the transom open just to get air into the room, and you're hopping up and throwing your manuscript through the transom so they can hit the top of the slush pile in the hopes that somebody might possibly read it.
So it gets in somehow.
Yeah. So that's the writer speak for long shot. At least it was 20 years ago. Probably I'm archaic now, but it happens. And you hear so many stories about that. If you do go the traditional publishing route, mostly what you get is really amazing stories about how they went. I mean, Sherry Priest she wrote a book called Bone Shaker. She actually sold a 3-book series and wrote them all, and they sold decently well, but then another publisher picked her up for a 2-book series, and it went down, finally got down to 1, and her publisher actually had a heart attack and passed away. And so nothing ever came of that book, but she had completed it. So she went on and wrote another book. She sold 1 book to that publisher again to a different editor. And that different editor wound up, somebody else at that company got assigned to clean up this guy's projects when he had the coronary. And they went and they found her book on the table and said, well, I'd rather publish this one. Since we're already under contract and we already have a book from her, can we publish this one first? I believe in it. So those 2 editors had to put their mind together, and then they had to call her, and she said, yeah, that's fine. You can publish that one instead. And they published, and that wound up being her breakthrough success and sold a few million books. And now they're really happy. But that was her 8th sold book. If you can imagine writing and selling 7 books before you have one that is commercially successful and puts your name on the map, it's, why I would rather just indie publish it and then beat the streets, learn how to market, get it sold myself.
And sometimes people that do the indie publishing first and do see some success will get noticed by traditional publishers who will then want to take on maybe a revised version of that book, possibly too,
Yes.
at times.
A lot of people don't know this, but Tom Clancy self-published originally, and so did the Harry Potter series. There was a small self-published run of that before it got picked up. So, yeah, it does happen.
Many routes. Yep.
Anyways, other questions? Well, I love it when I'm talking to people trying to make them an offer, and they're out there on Facebook land making offers. I want to drink some of Patty's super drink that she because she said it next to a computer. If it can make me write better without crashing, I'm like, I gotta try that.
Market it to authors, Patty. No.
Could be your niche.
This training has been the most helpful one that I've seen. Really,
Thank you.
yeah, just spot on for me, Andy and Krista. Thank you very much.
Great.
Exactly what I needed.
Good.
And I want to buy that drink, Patty. Send me the recipe.
Yeah,
I'll hook you up.
Krista, have you seen her marketing
No, this-
copy?
I don't think I've paid attention to it super closely, but maybe I should, huh?
You should. If you read her marketing copy, it's
Yeah.
like really good.
Okay. Hmm.
No, this has been really good, and yeah, so finally doing what God's been wanting me to do for a long time. So thank you for all your input. And I'm looking forward to continuing,
Cool.
and so I can do this correctly. I don't want to. I just feel like this sense of quit wasting time, right? I mean, we waste so much time trying to figure it out ourselves when somebody can help us. The experts. You are the experts.
True.
But I also appreciate your faith and passion for God, and I think that's a key too, is just the heart connection I think we can have in a community is really powerful in a really good way. So
Cool.
appreciate
I
it.
agree. Thank you, Patty.
I think I'm going to have to step up my energy level. So, Patty, yeah, I may need that drink too. Yeah, because I got a lot of things going on. I wasn't planning on it. It was just a humdrum life for about 3-4 months here. And I thought, okay, yeah, I'm cruising. That's fine. And then part of Pedro's thing, I jumped in and probably jumped in too heavy, too hard. I had to back out a little bit. But I was still looking for some writing information. And then I sent something in and then Krista responded to me on that and said, hey, we'll have something coming up later on. And I kept waiting, and she finally came through. No, not finally, but she did come through with some information, and that was great.
There was a little delay.
But that's all right. It didn't hurt me one bit, but I'm feeling good about what I'm going through and what I'm heading into. It's just like all of a sudden, boom! God's laid a bunch of things in my river. I guess would be another way of saying it. But I'm ready to go for it. I don't live by a river, but I like to use that idea a lot, and it flows. But yeah, I appreciate your patience with me on some things, but we'll keep on going. Thanks a lot. Thanks so much, Andy. You guys make a good team on this here. We're going to keep on going. So
Awesome. Thank you.
you guys, Patty and Mark, you're going to stick with us, aren't you? Or
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Otherwise, I think I'd probably end up kind of floundering and getting frustrated.
That happens a lot to authors. They're,
Yeah.
when you're in that community and you're in the group that is working on amazing things, then you feel motivated, you feel accountable, it's just, and you get the information that you need, because you might get stuck because you get unmotivated, you might get stuck because you have a question that can't seem to get answered. But when you're in that group, then you can keep moving forward. Yeah. It's a lot easier.
I tend to be a pantser.
A pantser.
Yeah, flying by the seat of my pants.
This kind of.
No, but when I was looking at that Academy website, man, that thing is insane. That's a huge piece of work. It wasn't just like, here's 3 little sections, hit these 3 lines and figure it out. But that is huge website. That's huge.
There are a lot of sections there, and I am every day building things into them so that it's going to be ready at least right away with a lot of things to check out, and then more continuing to be put in there as we go along. So, yes.
Krista, did you post that link in the group, in the 21-day group?
I think I saw it.
I shared my screen yesterday.
Okay.
I shared my screen and showed it. I could.
There's Andy. You have one. Is that the one you're talking about? For the pay for the whole thing.
I posted a link. Yeah, here's where you can buy it in the group, and then send an email also. But
okay, yeah.
I have not shared my link with anybody at this point.
So you mean the outside world?
Sorry, say that again, Patty.
You mean the outside world, outside of this group? Or
The only people who saw anything was you guys yesterday on the live training when I shared my screen. That was it. So.
Are you and Paige going to do some big book writing challenge deal to launch it?
Yes.
Of course.
some kind of deal, definitely.
Yes, all to be. I mean, we've already figured out pricing and stuff. The $97 a month or $9.97 a year, or $19.97 a year to include a coaching pack part of it and a manuscript review part of it, and then a couple other things too. So people are going to be able to have the opportunity to come into the group at whatever level kind of works for them at the time. So anyway.
It's really good that you're doing a $97 a month too, because it's not like a big bust out money making thing. You know what I mean? So that it makes it more doable for a lot of people, where they're not having to come a huge chunk of change.
Yes.
So.
And they can test it out too and go, well, we'll try it out for a month and see how it is, and hopefully then they will realize that they're getting a lot more done when they're with us, and they're finding answers that they've needed, or they're finding ideas and strategies they didn't know that they needed. And no matter where somebody's at in their process, there's going to be information. I mean, somebody might think, oh, I'll just be in there for 2 months while I'm working on my manuscript. Okay, well, then what are you going to do when it comes to all the publishing pieces that you need to understand, and then the marketing part of it? And anyway, so no matter where somebody is at, I believe it's going to be the community that they need and the information that they need as well. So,
Definitely.
Yes. And I'm going to enjoy it. I'm actually, because this is starting, I'm setting aside some of the other things that I do in my life to really focus on this. This is going to be, I think I've kind of lived a life where it's been a little bit of a buffet. honestly. Oh, sorry. Lawnmowers are coming by my driveway here. So if you hear that, I've had the opportunity to do all kinds of different things, and I have enjoyed that. I think this is the one thing that is really where my heart is at. So I'm gonna put all my effort into this and my focus into this. It's gonna be awesome. I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah. So, any other questions? Probably a lot of questions for Krista because she's got so much in that author academy. You know, even I'm excited. I'm most excited, I think, at this moment about trying to kind of collabor with her on specific author platform techniques. Can we come up with sort of the elements and a lot of information about the elements of how to build your author platform so that marketing's customized to the needs of an author? And I love her idea about training, like interview techniques and training for, because that will come up over and over and over and over again. If you ever go hand selling, it's the same kind of spiel, you know, really trying to answer questions and keep people interested in your book, but also trying to figure out what they'd like to read, you know, so that you know that you're selling them a book they're going to enjoy. And that's one of the secrets of my success, I think, for online selling is that I've done a lot of in-person events. So Patty, you're way ahead on that because you've done a lot of in-person events speaking on your topic. And so it helps a lot to get to know your audience.
Yeah.
Well, if
Richard, how's mama? I mean, how's your wife?
yeah.
She's doing good. You can see her there in the background there. She's my wife. Yeah, she's teaching yet, and she had yesterday off. But she was enjoying listening to the beginning part of this here today while we were eating lunch, and because she teaches writing in her class some, but it's on the elementary level. But she's a good grammar. She enjoys teaching grammar. So watching, listening to this about building sentences or, building the story line was good. She enjoyed it. But yeah, she's doing good. She's doing good. Yeah. Thank you. I got one little silly question. When I was reading a book the other day. Something I always have done when I'm in a chapter book, I want to know how much longer do I have until the next chapter, till the end of the chapter, because I need to adjust my time. So I thought, man, it'd be nice to know if there's 20 pages in this chapter, am I on page 4 or 5? And so I can kind of judge as to, before I got to walk out the door, whether I can make it to the end of the chapter before I have to leave. So it was almost thought it'd be nice to make at the top of the book, each page 5 of 20, page 6 of 20, or something to that effect. Kind of give me a gauge as to, I bet you no one's ever done that.
You mean for the reader experience?
Yeah, in the reader experience.
You do get that with ebooks. At least my Kindle for phone, for Android will do that. And you're right, it does add to the reader experience where you're like, it'll tell you the estimate of how long you have left to read at your pace.
That's to finish the book though, right?
I think it's to the end of the chapter, but it might be. Okay. I can't remember. It is motivating though. You're like, I only got 3 minutes left in this. I read a lot before I go to sleep. So it's nice to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think somebody with a paper book, if they're worried, they could just kind of, okay, I'm almost there.
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
My neighbor brought me, sorry, that was my neighbor at the door, and on riding his lawnmower to my house, brought an enormous bag full of lettuce from his garden. So nice. Anyway.
Cool.
Amazing. That has nothing to do with books, but.
All right. Well, I'll let you all get back to writing then. If there's any other questions, you can email me, or you can shout them out now. But love all of you, and I appreciate you. Thank you for your compliments. I'm really, really, really glad to get feedback, not just because it pumps up my ego, but mainly because it's very validating that people feel like they got their money's worth, and that motivates me to do it again, because I feel like, yeah, people would take part in this and they would get something from it, and that's big. That's big for me. So I appreciate that. Thanks, you guys.
Recommend it in a heartbeat.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yep.
All right, you guys.
God
Get back
bless.
to it. Have a
Cheers.
good
So much.
one. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll send you guys notes really soon.
Okay.
Good.